Back for another video about Pokemon design. So we're talking about Generation 2. There's less Pokemon in Generation 2 than the first one, so it is a little bit harder to make a list out of 10 and 5, but I did the job. And I scared the dog. You're right. Generation 2 I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for. For whatever reason, I didn't play it as much as any of the other Pokemon generations, and I don't entirely know why. Like, I played Generation 3 a lot at a time where I was older, so you feel like that would be less cool time to play Pokemon, but I just don't remember Generation 2 as much. So, that was another reason why this list was a little bit harder to make. But, I did it. So, there's a little bit of debate on whether or not some of these Pokemon in this generation were originally designed for the first one, but I don't have hard, concrete information on whether or not that's true. This was the generation that tried first time that Pokemon games were attempted to be balanced. They rearranged some of the typings a little bit in some of the kind of like lesser known categories like bug and poison and stuff like that. And there were two types added. There was dark and there was steel, both of which were an attempt to kind of nerf psychic a little bit. They still didn't do a great job expanding the amount of ghost Pokemon there were, and I found that a lot of the designs I liked were like interesting typings or going against the grain of what a type tended to be at that point in time and into the future. There's also a generation with a lot of like Pokemon I find kind of useless, or they are meme Pokemon, or they are just padding out the numbers in a gaming mechanic I don't particularly like. So we'll definitely go over those. But here's the good list. Top of the list, it's easy to say, is Skarmory. It is a cool design. It is a good use of a new typing and a new item to evolve a Pokemon. It evolves a cool Pokemon in Scyther into something else. It also, I feel like, is a little bit balanced because when you got Skarmory, he's really strong. He can have a move that gives you priority, but he's also 4 times weak to fire. So that is always nice to have a Pokemon have a weakness, frankly. So Skarmory is a cool design, all around just a good Pokemon to have around. Next we got Shuckle, which isn't my cup of tea when it comes to the Pokemon I like to play with, but it is an example of a defensive-minded Pokemon, and it was nice for those to be a thing that existed. I think the idea of a little bug in a rock or a worm in a rock was also kind of an interesting design. So that's Shuckle. We got Blissey, who is a special wall, the specialist of walls, and was probably a good example of what a normal Pokemon can be at that point in time. I think it's definitely an upgrade over Chansey when it comes to like visual aesthetic as well. I did have a Blissey at one point in time. Again, not usually my cup of tea when it comes to Pokemon I play with, but I don't know if it's a good Pokemon today, but it was definitely a good Pokemon for a while. Next, we got Crobat. Crobat is a cool design. It also makes Golbat into what feels like a usable Pokemon, so that's always nice. I definitely remember using Crobat, maybe in Gen 4 or something like that. It just kind of ups the ante to a bat that looks like it's kind of attitude and could actually do something. 5, I have Ampharos. I know a lot of electric Pokemon tend to be fast and tend to have a strong special attack, and that's about it. Ampharos was kind of a different way of going about things, having a tougher electric Pokemon. So I appreciate Ampharos after seeing so many electric Pokemon that are kind of have like one purpose. I feel like Ampharos was a little bit different in that, and it's just kind of a cool design. I don't know if it's a sheep, I don't know if it's a dragon, I don't know what it is, but I enjoyed it. Number 6 is Jumpluff. On that same idea, it is kind of a grass Pokemon that feels like it does something a little bit different. It is faster than a lot of other grass Pokemon. I just have a soft spot in my heart for this thing. I know it's basically like a pollen seed thing, but I just thought it was a cool little design. Number 7 is Umbreon, and this is an example of a dark Pokemon. I feel like is maybe it was not only like a great example of a dark Pokemon, it was also a great example of like a special wall uh, to help out the special stat divide that was going on. I believe this generation. I can't remember off the top of my head, but special defensive wall, just kind of a stylish design and a great example of a dark Pokemon. Probably maybe the most famous dark Pokemon at the time. I think Tyranitar might have something to say about that. But number 8, I got Piloswine. I just think ground ice typing is an interesting one. It's kind of a comical character. Could have just been an ice pig or whatever, and instead it's this goofy thing with the bangs hanging down and all that stuff. Though we would eventually get a more evolved version of this Pokemon that made it a little more competitively viable. Piloswine was still a fun Pokemon in the second generation. Skarmory is number 9. A great example of a steel Pokemon, an interesting typing, and at one point a fairly interesting Pokemon to play with. I definitely had a Skarmory in Generation 4 that was a fun change of pace for me. So I don't know if it was the most famous steel Pokemon at the time, but it was a great example of one. And last I got Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet was just an interesting play mechanic of always reflecting the damage back against you, and it also just seems like a comical Pokemon to have. I don't know if it's a reference to something else in Japanese media or culture, but it is a funny Pokemon design. So again, kind of had a little difficulty putting this one together. I don't particularly think the starters from this generation are all that impressive. There's just something about them that seems kind of basic. Like, okay, you're a fire badger, you're a water crocodile, you're this, you're that. The next generation would get a lot more interesting in what it did with the starters, but this generation has 3 single typing starters, and it's just kind of. It was nice to have a Meganium that wasn't also a poison type. That was appreciated, but not enough to put it on the list. So here's my worst. Again, second generation is so beloved, but like, man, there's a lot of meme Pokemon. I kind of hate baby Pokemon, especially how they were used at this time. I just feel like you were padding out the Pokedex and the numbers and making less good versions of Pokemon you already had that was annoying to get into with breeding and stuff like that. Eventually, the series would have baby Pokemon available earlier in the game that you're able to play with and level up and evolve into something else. But at this time, it was like, oh, you have a Clefairy. Do you want to have a worse version of a Clefairy? Cool. Do you want to jump through these hoops to get it? Great. I hated baby Pokemon. I kind of still hate baby Pokemon. Second on my worst list, Unown. You made a Pokemon version of the alphabet. Okay. Are we using game space on this? Is it any good? No. Is it interesting and unique and gonna be multiple different types? Okay. You could have done more Pokemon, but instead you made an entire alphabet of crappy psychic Pokemon. Thanks. Number 3, Delibird. Pokemon all about randomness, I guess. I think it can learn other moves, but again, meme Pokemon, Delibird. That's it. Nothing else to say. Number 4, Mischievous. Less about the design, about the what it looks like, and more about this was your ghost alternative that didn't have psychic, that could actually take on. It didn't have poison that could actually take on psychic Pokemon. And stat-wise, it's just not there. It's just not there at the time. So by second gen, you have 2 options, Gengar and this. Why would you not go Gengar? They would eventually evolve Mischievous, thankfully, but until the 3rd and 4th gens, you just really don't have a lot of Ghost Pokemon. And frankly, there's a lot of Ghost Pokemon further on in the series that I think are more interesting than Mischievous. It's just kind of a missed opportunity here. Number 5, I just have baby Pokemon again. Like, God, I hate baby Pokemon. There's so many. Elekid, Magby. I think that's this generation. I'm not totally sure. Cleffa, Eaglybuff, Pichu. Mime Junior. I don't even know if that's this generation again, but this is where it all started. And I hated all of them. I don't need any baby Pokemon ever, ever, ever. So that's my list. I've got a bunch of interesting typings and interesting Pokemon. And the best, and then the worst is just baby Pokemon Unknown, Delibird, Mischievous. Like they could have done something better with those spots, in my opinion. So, what do you think? Do you hate baby Pokemon as much as I do? Do you think Unknown is just a big old waste of time? Let me know in the comments section. I'll see you back for Generation 3, one of my favorite generations. Maybe the reason I started this thing to defend Generation 3.